Good morning. My name is Shadi Martini. I'm the Executive Director for the Multi-Faith Alliance for Syrian Refugees, speaking to you from New York City. I'll be having a discussion today with the Head of Advocacy and Communication for the Multi-Faith Alliance for Syrian Refugees, Betsy Dribbe, who is based in Washington, D.C. The topic of today's discussion will be private resettlement that is being announced by the US government. The US government has announced the use of private resettlement to assist in resettling Ukrainian refugees. It's called Uniting for Ukraine. This has been a highly successful program, as well as a sponsored Circle program for Afghan refugees. It now intends to open private resettlement to other groups of refugees before the end of 2022. This could be a big boost for the future of 29,000 Syrian refugees in the resettlement pipeline. Betsy, welcome and nice to have you.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you.
Betsy, my first question is to explain to people who are interested is, what is private resettlement?
Private resettlement offers a chance for an individual, a family, a civic group to help refugees by literally assisting in their resettlement in America.
Oh, so who will be eligible to undertake a private resettlement?
If you're a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, you may be able to sponsor an individual refugee or a refugee family.
Is there like a criteria for eligibility and who can be resettled under private resettlement?
We believe that the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration will determine who's eligible, but it's likely to be, in the case of Syrians, which we're all very interested in, would likely be those that are already in what we call the pipeline, that they are somewhere along in the process already of seeking resettlement in America.
So the program had already started for Ukrainian refugees. When will the programs begin for other refugees? Specifically, we're talking about Syrian refugees here.
Well, we're hoping that it will start by the end of this year. The Ukrainian program, as you mentioned, has been highly successful, where so many people have come forward to help Ukrainians who have fled the war. We also know that those from Afghanistan who have fled to America have also been embraced by families and individuals for private resettlement. So the US government has said, well, this program works and we should be opening it up to a much wider group. And we are hoping that will include Syrians.
So it's interesting. Is private resettlement a new program for the federal government, or it existed before?
Actually, the program is not new. Back in 1987 to 1995, the federal government did have a private resettlement program. And there were many church groups, mosques, individuals, civic groups that were interested. But the problem was that you had to defray the costs of resettlement. And one of the biggest costs was medical insurance, which we all know is very costly. And eventually the program had to be terminated. But a new program would take into consideration those major costs with federal programs to assist those who are interested in doing resettlement.
So I know the Multi-Faith Alliance and other groups have been pushing for private resettlement relaunching, but why is the federal government relaunching private resettlement now?
Well, for a number of reasons. You would say that a lot of situations converged. We know that there are a number of wars that are going on. Certainly the Syrian war, which has been on for so many years with so many people having to flee. We have the Ukrainians, we have the Afghans, we have people from all over the globe who are beleaguered. We have we have a federal resettlement program, but it's very frail because in recent years, Money was taken away from the program, and to a certain extent, under the last administration, it was shut down. So what we have is a frail system sponsored by the US government, but we have so many refugees in need. The US has decided that private resettlement would be a very good complement to whatever the federal government is doing.
That's very interesting. Do other countries have private resettlement? Is there other examples around the world that we can say that was successful as well?
Absolutely. In fact, two very robust programs. One is the Canadian system, and also Australia has a very robust private resettlement program. So we're able to learn from what good things have happened with that, and also to serve as an inspiration that individuals and groups really do want to help refugees, and this is a tangible, measurable way for them to do it.
So, I have like a couple of questions. Like, for one, some people might be worried about like, is the federal government abdicating from its responsibility and the federal resettlement process, and would the private resettlement be an alternative? Or it's not, and what the critical elements for a successful U.S. private resettlement program?
Good question, Shadi. First of all, the federal government, we believe, and in fact, even the federal government believes, that they must maintain a role in resettlement. However, as stated before, because things are rather frail in the current program, they want to supplement it with private resettlement. There's a term that's often used, additionality, which means that a private resettlement program would complement whatever the federal government is doing. That's one element that would be very important. The second element is very good vetting on both sides. For security reasons, for peace of mind, it is important that the federal government maintain a good vetting system of the individuals and groups and families that want to seek to take on private resettlement. And at the same time, those refugees would, of course, need to be vetted as to coming into the US. Third of all, as stated before, we have to be sure that the major expenses that really undercut a robust program in the 90s are addressed. So public needs such as food stamps, housing, insurance would still need to be met by the federal government because individuals and families just can't defray those costs.
So thank you for this clarification. It's very important to understand that this is in addition to the federal resettlement process. Now, we have a lot of questions a lot of times throughout our work that individuals or religious institutions come to us and the Multi-Faith Alliance and ask us, how can I get involved in helping Syrian refugees? So the question is, how can these individuals and groups get involved in this private resettlement process?
Well, first of all, the State Department, US State Department, is fleshing out the details. So I would suggest that in the fall, one begin to look at the State Department website. They will have some kind of an announcement when they are ready and prepared to offer guidance on how groups, individuals, even universities may be able to do private resettlement. Until then, if you're interested, there are several things you can be doing. First of all, one prudent thing would be to set aside funds, begin saving up, because there will be expenses involved, and your groups, your alumni associations, your mosques, your churches, even your family, if they seem interested in this, should be setting aside money. And of course, first and foremost, you need to talk to each of these elements if you think you want to get involved, to make sure they're on board, because it is a very big responsibility. It is very rewarding, both in terms of those who sponsor and those who are sponsored. But one needs to be realistic that this is not a short-term initiative, that you will have responsibilities going forward for a while, because everything, food, shelter, helping getting people started with education, even learning to drive or food shopping, all have to be learned by refugees, and they will be looking to their host under private resettlement. But be assured that there will be support systems in place. There'll be federal government programs, state and local, to help the individuals and groups having private resettlement that's effective.
Well, that's very interesting to know, Betsy. Thank you very much for this information. Lastly, I want to make a comment and last clarification to make it for people who are watching us. Is first of all, this things that has been done before, like even through the federal resettlement process, a lot of NGOs and private citizens and groups have been helping refugees in this process because they help provided by the federal government, specifically in items like learning to drive, applying for a driver's license, and other simple things that we see it would take it for granted has been done by private citizens and private group. My last questions, and I think this clarification is very important. The vetting process. No one is going to go without vetting. Either the person who's applying for someone to be privately resettled or the refugees themselves. And this could take some time. And so people should be aware of it and not get frustrated.
Well, I think it's important to note that those who will be resettled first under private resettlement are likely already in the pipeline. In other words, private resettlement being a complement means that there have been security vettings, there have been medical examinations, there are all things that go into resettlement in general. So you will see most likely those who are well along in the resettlement process who will be matched up with families and groups first. So yes, vetting is very important on both sides.
Okay, thank you. So the people who are already been vetted, that will be much faster, but people who are new to the process will have to get vetted. So that might take several months or more than 6 months or 2 years to get vetted. Thank you very much, Betsy, for all this information. And thank you for being with us and for your time. Dear viewers, thank you, and I hope this information is valuable for you and for your loved one and for anyone who or you are trying to help and resettle and refugee want to resettle here in the USA. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, Shadi.